Now, the coronavirus pandemic has shifted the way in which we do things. With many opting to work at home, most companies around the world are considering the adoption of a 4-day work week. To discuss this from a South African perspective, I'm joined by Aadil Patel, head of the Employment Department at Cliff Decker Hofmeyr. Very good afternoon to you. Thank you for your time. Considerations around the adoption of a 4-day work week. I mean, it sounds attractive, but before we all start getting excited, what adjustments will the country's labour laws need?
Hello, good afternoon to you and your listeners. I think when we talk about a 4-day working week, we need to understand what is the reason that an organization would choose to implement such a measure. One is certainly because of the health and safety of employees. Two, and commensurate with that, is a reduction of working hours, and as a result of that, more time for employees to spend with their families and social activities, and to assist them in engaging with their mental health. When the 4-day working week was mooted, or the 40-hour working week was mooted, in a country like ours, it's mooted so that we can increase or we can deal with the levels of unemployment. So while employees may be working 4 days a week, the 5th day, 6th day, and 7th day, you may get or you may employ other employees. Now, while a 4-day working week or a 40-hour week is attractive, unless we move to a productivity-based working model, you must expect a commensurate reduction in one's income as such. Now, under the Basic Conditions of Employment Act, the Minister of Labour, as quite some time back, had indicated that South Africans, through collective bargaining, through sectoral determination, as a result of the Department of Labour and the Commission of Employment Conditions, should consider and look into a reduction of the 45-hour working week to a 40-hour working week, which is 4 days. This is not something new in South Africa. It has been there. It has been there from a legislative perspective. It is evident through the collective bargaining space. It just simply nobody has taken the bulls by the horn in order to implement a 4-day working week. And that's understandable because we haven't matured as a country where we have adopted a productivity-based working model. We still require bums on seats. We want to still see people physically. Even though we have this notion of hybrid working through COVID, you would have noticed that through the last 2 years, employers have implemented technology to ensure that employees are online and productive during their core working hours. So to sum up, what do we need to get to a 4-day working week? It's certainly a change of mindset within corporate South Africa. And what does that a change of mindset says? That we need to move towards a productivity base. 2, we need to look at how we're going to deal with this through sectoral determinations published by the Department of Labour, the Ministry of Labour and Employment. 3, through collective bargaining. And what then happens is we need employees to come to the table to say, I'm willing to work a 4-day working week. I'm willing to take a reduction in some of my employment in the interest of the greater good of all my fellow South Africans so that more people can be employed should employers require a 7-day working period for employees.
Sorry, if you'll allow me to interrupt, did you say it would mean perhaps an employee would say, I'm willing to lose off some of my salary because of this change?
Definitely. How would you, if we're in an environment where you don't have a productivity-based working model, and what do I mean by that? Where you are not remunerated simply on the basis of how many hours you spend at the office, but rather whether you spend 1 hour or 45 hours, whether you're working from a coffee shop or the office, there's a set task. What you want is an employer wanting more, greater productivity during the period within which you are employed. You are not working 5 days a week. And because we don't have a productivity-based working model, you are paid for being at work, occupying space, working on time. You're giving less time to your employer. And as a result of that, there has to be a commensurate reduction in employment. Now, I know there are different models available where people say to you that the work that I can do in 5 days, I can do it in 4 days, and therefore my remuneration must remain the same. However, that sort of thinking only works where you agree that you are going to be remunerated on a productivity basis and not just simply come to work and do what's allocated for a particular day or the like, where your employer is mature enough that they can trust you insofar as you do not need to have bums on seats. And within the South African marketplace, certainly during the 2 years within COVID, from our experience, it has been shown that what employers have done, where employees have worked from home, and that there has been a trust deficit. So employers have implemented technology which monitors employees and the way that they work and the like. So when you say to me that internationally, we've moved towards a 4-day working week, look at the countries that have implemented them. Belgium, Switzerland, the International Labour Organization have spoken about it. These are countries that have developed economies. Within South Africa, we have a high unemployment rate. We certainly have within our economy a trust deficit, which apart from the industrial unrest that we've seen in 2022, look at the conduct of employers during the last two years. If employers trusted their employees, why was there a need to implement technology which monitors whether employees are online and being productive? So in essence, there's a legislative framework available for us. There's nothing that needs to be done there. The basic conditions of employment access consider a reduction to a 40-hour working week through collective bargaining, sectoral determination, and investigation. It hasn't been a reality. Why? Because there's certainly a trust deficit.
Besides, if you'll allow me to interrupt you there, besides the trust deficit, I mean, let's look at the current state of affairs. Fuel has gone up, the cost of food has gone up, and, you know, South Africans are mentally exhausted. I mean, the 4-day work week sounds exciting for those who may be mentally exhausted and feeling depressed and anxious during this period. So it doesn't really leave much room for the consideration of a 4-day work week when you talk about a reduction in remuneration.
I completely agree with you. But that is why working less is not the solution. It's working differently that has to be the solution. So let me give you some examples. Corporate South Africa has a responsibility to ensure that our employees are looked after from a mental perspective. We flooded with bad news on a daily basis. Corporate South Africa has to take this into account when developing programs within the workplace. Simply asking employees, oh, you know what, you can sit at home, take a reduction in income. People just simply can't afford to. Take a reduction in income for the greater good of all South Africans so we can increase employment so that more employees have access to employment. Not going to work when you have fuel, electricity, a water crisis. So what is the solution? The solution is how we start working. And what does that mean? Not requiring bums on seats, trusting your employees, developing a productivity-based working model and start engaging with your trade unions where you have collective agreements and collective bargaining as to what that productivity model looks like. Getting the Ministry of Labour to look at publishing sectoral determinations for a reduction to 40-hour working week, but not simply work as usual. There has to be a change, because if there's no change, employers will not be able to sustain a 40-hour working week and retain the current remuneration levels as such. Now, I know that everyone, we say that a 4-day working week seems to be the utopia to assist us to get in touch and to deal with the stress of life. But we live in an environment where employers need to make money, need to be productive, and they can't simply pay employees where we are not getting the levels of activity and the levels of productivity that one would have expected.
Yeah. So what then can we learn from the countries who are getting it right? Norway, Denmark, Netherlands, and Germany?
I think what we need to do is we need to start trusting our employees first. And that's a long drawn out game. Then we need to increase the trust between the parties. We need to ensure that in certain sectors we move to a productivity work model where what we tell employees is that this is your task for the week. This is what I require. I don't care when you work, how you collaborate. Come Friday or Thursday, this is what I want from you. If I am getting that, then the remuneration becomes ancillary. So I think that's the second thing. The third thing is we need to, as corporate South Africa, invest in more activities and programs which assist our employees to deal with the general stresses of living in South Africa like they did elsewhere as such. The key element is there needs to be an increase in the trust between employers and employees, because if they're not, the 40-hour working week is not achievable given our current economic circumstances.
Very well. Thank you so much for weighing in on that discussion. Aadil Patel, Head of the Employment Department at Cliff Decker Hofmeyr, speaking there about the probabilities. There's a lot to consider before a 4-day work week can be something that becomes a norm. Still to come on the Newsfeed PM edition, we'll take a look at news making headlines further afield. Stay tuned.